Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we've got another news and rumor video here to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at some signings from our past couple of days, some injury updates, some recalls and reassignments, a GM change in Buffalo, and we've got some trade rumors involving the Kings, the Penguins, the Devils, and the Minnesota Wild. We'll touch on all these updates coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget the subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. And don't forget to stay tuned for videos coming out in the very near future. So in today's video, we've got a trade rumor video here to discuss. If you guys haven't heard already in one of my previous videos or on my community posts, this is going to be my last week of regularly scheduled videos before January 4th. I'm taking a couple of weeks off. I will have pre-recorded videos that do get posted and uploaded periodically throughout my 2-week hiatus. But from December 20th to January 4th, I will not be doing these regularly scheduled videos. This is one of my last few trade rumor videos of the 2025 portion of the 25-26 season. So definitely let's get into this video. And if you haven't already, check out my What If the NHL Had a Script Week 10 video. It's on the channel already. I think you guys will really like it. One of my better ones that I've done so far, so if you haven't already, go check it out. But in today's video, we've got a trade rumor video here to discuss. So we're going to start off, as we usually do, by looking at a couple of signings. There were 2 signings from our past couple of days that I want to touch on here today. First, Reichel defenseman, who's 23 years old, Joel Nystrom, who's a 5'11 defenseman. He was a 2021 7th round pick of the Carolina Hurricanes. Because of some injuries to the Carolina Hurricanes team, he's actually gotten into some playing time this year. His first little taste at the NHL level of NHL action. He has 5 assists in 24 games for the Carolina Hurricanes, and the Hurricanes have liked what they saw. Nystrom, who's in the final year of his ELC, has signed a 4-year contract extension with an AAV of $1.225 million to remain in the Hurricanes organization. Now Nystrom, like we just talked about, is getting his first taste of NHL action. He was a 7th round pick from just a couple of years ago. He got his first taste of NHL action this year. Last year was actually playing in the SHL, where he put up 6 goals and 27 points in 51 games. Looks like a decent third, maybe second pair defenseman of the future for the Carolina Hurricanes. So sort of a similar deal that they did with Kochetkov, sort of like mid-term, but with like lower AAV. That's sort of the similar thing they did with Nystrom here. So not a bad pickup here. I think Nystrom just recently got returned to the AHL because Jacob Slavin was activated off of injury reserve. So very interesting note there, but Nystrom has shown some really good flashes at the NHL level because they need to be called upon, and he is not signed to a 4-year extension. So very interesting note there. Another signing we saw was in the Vancouver Canucks organization. Max Sasson, who has a 1-year league minimum deal, has actually signed a contract extension. Sasson gets a 2-year contract extension beginning next year with an AAV of $1 million. This isn't a bad pickup here for the Canucks either. Sasson is a 25-year-old center prospect. He has also gone into a couple of games of NHL action this year because of injuries, has 6 goals and 8 points in 29 games for more like a 4th, 3rd line sort of guy at this point in time. Those aren't bad numbers for the Vancouver Canucks. Sasson also got into a couple of games last year, and also 29 games last year. He put up 3 goals and 7 points. So he knows how to put up some points in a bottom 6 role. So I don't think this is a bad pickup here by any means for the Vancouver Canucks. It's a $1 million deal for 2 years for a 3rd, 4th line center who can score you some goals. So I think this is a really good pickup here for the Canucks. And if it doesn't work out, they can bury him in the minors. So very interesting note there. But Sasson in Vancouver has signed a 2-year extension, and Nystrom in Carolina has signed a 4-year extension. So some very interesting young players getting new deals in Carolina and Vancouver. Next, going on to a couple of injury updates. So we have a couple of injury updates here to talk about. First, Boston's Victor Arvidsson with a lower body injury and Jonathan Espiriot with an upper body injury. Both missed Sunday's game with their respective injuries. So hopefully they won't be out for an overlong period of time. Arvidsson's been in and out of the lineup for the Bruins so far this year with injuries. Espiriot was a recent call-up because of some injuries on the blue line. So not great news there. See, both those guys were injured. Hopefully they're not going to be out for an overlong period of time. Jacob Slavin, who missed 29 games with a lower body injury, as we just mentioned, was activated off of injury reserve and returned to game action on Sunday. So it's a big boost as the Canes get their best defenseman back on the ice. Connor Bedard, who was injured on December 12th with an upper body injury, apparently has been placed in injury reserve and will be reevaluated in early January. So that's a bad blow there for the Blackhawks. The only reason the Hawks Blackhawks were even close to a playoff spot was because of Connor Bedard, and now he's going to be out for at least the next 2 weeks, if not maybe even longer. So that's an awful blow there for the Blackhawks to lose Connor Bedard. Logan O'Connor, who has missed the entire year with a hip injury, is now dealing with a separate injury and will miss more time due to that. So that's not great news there for the Avalanche, as O'Connor was a really solid bottom six forward over the past couple of years. Well, Joel Kiviranta played on Saturday after leaving Thursday's game with the eye injury, so good to see Kiviranta never missed any time after being injured on Thursday. Patrick Kane suffered an upper body injury back over on Saturday and will miss at least the next 2 games for the Detroit Red Wings. That's not great news there. Kane has been actually picking up the pace as of late. Philip Danault missed Saturday's game with an illness and is out day to day. Hopefully won't be out for an over long period of time, but Danault did miss the most recent game for the LA Kings. Marcus Johansson and David Jiricek, both with lower body injuries, left Sunday's games and didn't return for the Minnesota Wild. So some bad blows there for the Wild, as Jiricek's a decent third pair defenseman right now, and Johansson's a pretty solid like third line forward. So see those two guys go down with injuries. Not overly great news there for Minnesota. Zachary LaRue was active off of injury reserve and returned to the AHL. He suffered a lower body injury about 5-ish weeks ago and was given a 4 to 6 week timeline. So he was apparently recovered enough that he was active off of injury reserve, and he's been sent back down to the minors. So we'll see how LaRue does at the AHL level. Mitch Rempe, who had missed almost 2 months with an upper body injury, was active off of long-term injury reserve and returned to game action on Monday. So it's a pretty decent boost there for the Rangers to get a really solid bottom six forward and Rempe back. Lars Eller won't remain with the Senators on their current road trip due to a lower body injury and will miss extended time. So hopefully it's not too severe. It probably will until at least after Christmas, but it sounds like it could be longer. So not great news there for Ottawa. While young AHL player Carter Yakimchuk left Ottawa's AHL game with undisclosed injury and didn't return. Yakimchuk's the Sens' best D prospect, so hopefully that's not going to be a too serious of an injury for the Ottawa Senators. Cam York, who missed a week and a half with upper body injury, returned to game action on Sunday, so it's a big boost for the Flyers to get some more defensive help back, and they could be getting even more in the near future, as Rasmus Ristolainen is traveling with the team and could make his season debut on their current road trip after he had season-ending surgery late last year. So very interesting note there, but it seems like Ristolainen could be near a return in the very near future. Will Smith and Philip Kurashev left Saturday's game with undisclosed injuries and didn't return, and have both been placed on injury reserve. So bad blows there, as Kurashev was starting to pick up the pace, and Will Smith is one of the best Sharks forwards at this point in time. Jared McCann, who has a lower body injury, was placed on injury reserve and will be out at least the next 3 weeks. While Mason Marchment missed Sunday's game with an illness and is out day to day, so hopefully Marchment will not miss too much time, but that's a bad blow to see the Kraken forward be out for any length of period of time. And then of course McCann's re-injured again, so bad stuff there for Seattle. Dylan Holloway was placed in injury reserve with a high ankle sprain and will be out 6 weeks, so we probably won't be seeing Dylan Holloway until late January, early February, so that's a bad blow there for the Blues. Emil Martinson-Lilleberg was placed in injury reserve with undisclosed injury, will miss at least a few weeks, so probably won't see Lilleberg and Tampa back until the new year, so bad stuff there for Tampa. Anthony Stolarz, who was out with upper body injury, has no timetable to start skating, so it seems like Stolarz is still a ways off from returning. Not great news there for Toronto. Marco Rossi, who had been out for over a month with a lower body injury, was actually off of injury reserve and made his Canucks debut on Sunday, so it's really good news there for former Wild and now current Vancouver Canuck Marco Rossi to get back into game action, while Elias Pettersson, who has been out with the upper body injury, missed Sunday's game and has been placed on injury reserve, so hopefully Pettersson will be out for an overly long period of time. Pavel Dorofeyev of Saturday's game with undisclosed injury didn't return. Hopefully it's nothing too serious. Dorofeyev is a big piece of the Golden Knights team. Charlie Lindgren, who was out a week with the undisclosed injury, was active off of injury reserve and returned to the lineup on Saturday, so I don't think he played, but he at least backed up, so it's a big boost there for the Caps. And Connor Hellebuyck, who missed 3 weeks after having a knee procedure, was active off of injury reserve and returned to game action on Saturday. That is a huge boost for the Winnipeg Jets to get their starting level goaltender back into the lineup, so very interesting note there. But those are some very interesting injury updates from our past couple of days. Next, we want to some reassignments, some recalls, some waivers, and a couple of other pieces of news. So when it comes to some reassignments, the Buffalo Sabres have reassigned young player Trevor Kuntar. The Carolina Hurricanes have reassigned young defenseman Yanni Nystrom. The Red Wings have sent down veteran Eric Gustafsson to the minors. Marushev in net for Pittsburgh. Bjorklund in net for Washington. DeVincentis in net for Winnipeg were all sent down to the minors. And Dylan Coughlin in Vegas has also been sent down to the minors. Some very interesting players who are assigned to the minors. While Osland in Buffalo Lardis in Chicago, Leonard in Detroit, Hudson in Edmonton, Haight in Minnesota, Addison in New Jersey, Reichel in Philadelphia, Chernyshov and Cardwell in San Jose, Stenberg in St. Louis, Melanson in Seattle, and Santini in Tampa were all recalled to the NHL level. So very interesting note there, especially younger guys like Ostlund, Lardis, Hudson, Haight, Chernyshov, Stenberg, and Melanson all getting NHL action as really young players. So really good stuff for all of those guys I just mentioned, but some very interesting recalls and reassignments from our past couple of days. We also saw 5 players be placed on waivers over the past number of days. Matt Dumba back over on Saturday was placed on waivers. We weren't sure at the time that happened if he was going to clear or not. I thought that he would probably clear because of his cap hit, and he did wind up clearing. So Dumba is now in the AHL for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and we shall see what the future holds for Matt Dumba. Also, another recent trade acquisition, Lukas Reichel in Vancouver, after the Canucks acquired a couple of wild players in that Quinn Hughes deal. They had too many roster players, so they needed to send someone down to the minors, and they decided to place Lukas Reichel, who they acquired a couple of weeks back from Chicago, on waivers. Now, I thought there was a possibility Reichel, he had some interest in the trade market, that there would be a team or two out there who might claim him, but he didn't. He wound up clearing. So very interesting to note there's Lukas Reichel is now cleared by the Vancouver Canucks. And then Laurent Brossoit in Chicago, Jonathan Berggren in Detroit, and Vlasislav Kolyachonok in Dallas were all placed on waivers yesterday. Kolyachonok, because I'm guessing the Stars were getting a little more healthier. Berggren, it just doesn't seem like it's working right now in Detroit. And Brossoit, he's recently just come off of a long injury stint, so he's being placed on waivers too. I think Brossoit will probably clear because of his recent injury status. I could maybe see Kolyachonok get clean, but I think it's more likely he clears. Berggren, with his cap hit, with what he could potentially bring, I wouldn't be surprised if there are a team or two out there who have a little bit of cap space who would take a run at trying to acquire Berggren via waivers. So I'd keep an eye on Berggren. So very interesting note there. But Dumba and Reichel both cleared waivers over the past couple of days, and Brossoit, Berggren, and Kolyachonok are all on waivers. So very interesting note there. And lastly here, going over to a couple pieces of news, Timo Meier has been placed on the non-roster due to a leave of absence that he's currently dealing with right now. So Meier's away from the team, so they placed him on the non-roster just to allow some more roster flexibility. So not too surprising there for the Devils. Well, we saw a GM change in Buffalo. Kevin Adams, the GM for Buffalo from over the past couple of seasons, is out after a pretty bad start for the Buffalo Sabres that has them currently 500 and the lowest team in the Eastern Conference. And with him out, they have hired special advisor Jarmo Kenklainen, former Jackets GM, as their new GM. So very interesting note there. Buffalo makes a change. I think hiring Kenklainen is not too bad. Kenklainen was the GM for the Jackets' only playoff series win in their franchise's history, and he knows how to build a good team. He's aggressive. We saw him be aggressive at the trade deadline a couple of years back when the Jackets actually won that playoff series, when he went out and acquired guys like Matt Duchene and Ryan DeZingle and things like that. So I think Kenklainen could be a really good GM for the Buffalo Sabres. It was time for a change, and it's another change for the Buffalo Sabres. So we shall see if this is the one that gets the Buffalo Sabres over the hump. But very interesting note there that Kenklainen is now the new GM in Columbus, and Kevin Adams is out. So very interesting note there. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comment section below. And lastly here, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So we have a couple of trade rumors to talk about. First with the Minnesota Wild. Carter Yaremchuk over on Daily Faceoff was recently talking about the Minnesota Wild. He's not one of those connected insiders. I think he was just speculating, so I don't think there's any sort of concrete evidence to say this is something that the Minnesota Wild are currently looking at. But he said because of the acquisition of Quinn Hughes, the Minnesota Wild could trade from a position of strength to try and add up front. We know that the Wild don't have the greatest of depth on their team. When they're healthy, they're pretty good, but they could probably use another top 9 forward. So Yaremchuk does say he wonders if the Minnesota Wild could try and move Jacob Middleton with the acquisition of Quinn Hughes. They have Hughes, Faber, Spurgeon, Brodin. That's their top 4. They have Middleton as a third pair defenseman right now, but they also have guys like Bogosian, Juracek, and Damon Hunt, who could also be serviceable third pair defensemen. So if they can move Jacob Middleton, who I think has 2 or 3 years left on his deal after this year at $4.3 million, it would give them some cap flexibility, and would potentially, I think there would be teams out there who would have some major interest in Jacob Middleton, who would be open to moving a forward in return. So I could see that be a possibility. I don't think he's far off the point. I'm not sure if they'd be completely open to moving Middleton. Maybe a guy like Juracek might be a little more enticing. But I think if they could move a defenseman, they have Quinn Hughes, and try and use that to add a forward, I think that'll be a very smart move there from the Minnesota Wild. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. I don't think the Wild are done by any means after acquiring Quinn Hughes, and I could see them potentially move off the defenseman, and Middleton I think would make some sense with the way the top four are structured right now in Minnesota, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. Next, going over to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Frank Seravalli, I think on one of his recent radio hits, was talking about the Pittsburgh Penguins, and he says that with the Pittsburgh Penguins having a really solid young rookie in the AHL level in Sergei Marushev, who they are very high on, they have Arthur Seelovs, and they have Yoel Blomqvist. If they wanted to run with a tandem of any of those two players, there's really no need for Stuart Skinner on the Pittsburgh Penguins team. So he says maybe close to the trade deadline, if there's a couple of teams out there who need some goaltending help. We know Montreal's a team who seems to very much need some goaltending help. Maybe Columbus. There might be a couple of other teams out there too who could use some goaltending help. Maybe they go after Stuart Skinner in the Pittsburgh Penguins organization. And I could see that. Like, I'm not exactly sure how many teams would need goaltenders right now, but I could definitely see Pittsburgh move off as Skinner. Like, he's in the final year of his deal. I don't think he's a long-term fit in Pittsburgh. And they've got younger guys like Seelovs, like Blomqvist, like Marushev, who I think they really want to see what they've got in those guys. So I wouldn't be one bit surprised if Skinner was flipped. I think that's a very likely possibility, especially if the price is right for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So I'll have to keep an eye on that, but maybe closer to trade deadline, we could see Stuart Skinner change teams again, so I'll have to wait and see on that. Next, going over to Elliot Friedman. He was recently talking about the New Jersey Devils. I mentioned two players that the New Jersey Devils could try and move as sort of cap dumps. Now, it would be really hard to move either one of these players because both guys have trade protection, either no trade clauses or no movement clauses, so it'd be very hard to move either one of these guys. But he says Dougie Hamilton and Andre Palat are two guys that the Devils could look to move. Those are very interesting names. If you go back to my season preview video from all the way back, I think it was in August, I said that the Devils, one of their big priorities for the offseason was to move off some cap, and I mentioned Hollowell, who they did move off of, but I also mentioned Palat and Hamilton. Hamilton had, I think, 1 year left after this year at a $9 million cap hit, and Palat, I think, has 2 years left after this year at a $6 or $5 million cap hit. Palat has not been the sort of same player he was in years past. He's getting up there in age. He's not the productive player he once was. And on top of that, Dougie Hamilton, he's still a pretty serviceable top pair defenseman, but I'm not sure if he's worth $9 million anymore. So like, I think both guys are probably a little bit overpaid. They both have trade protection. So because of all of that, these two are going to be very hard to move. But if the Devils really want to go after upgrade up front, which is something they really want to do, try and get some sort of a forward upgrade, they're probably going to have to move one of these two guys. So it'll be very interesting to note there, but keep your eye on the Devils, as we know they've been linked to some of the Nationals forwards, maybe even a Braden Shen, maybe a Jason Robertson if he was to come available. There's been a couple of other guys, Tuck, if he comes available, I think we'll have some interest in Alex Tuck too. So they would have some very much interest in some of the bigger forwards of the trade deadline, but at this point in time, they probably need to move off some cap. So keep your eye on Palat and Hamilton, as if they can work with those two guys to work around their trade protection, we might be able to see a Palat or Hamilton deal at some point before the trade deadline. And lastly, going over to Frank Seravalli and Elliot Friedman, and actually a couple of other sources have also mentioned this, saying that the Habs and the LA Kings could actually be in trade talks right now involving Kings center Phillip Danault. Now, Phillip Danault has been in the LA Kings organization the past couple of years. Before he went to Los Angeles as a free agent, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago, he was in the Montreal Canadiens organization and was the one thing the Canadiens desperately need right now: a second line center, which Danault can be. He's shown that in the past. So very interesting note there, like we talked about, Danault has not had the greatest of starts to the season this year in the Los Angeles Kings organization. He's only got a couple of assists, hasn't really been a huge point producer, has been alright defensively, but I think the Kings really just want some more secondary scoring. So it seems like he's on the block for the Los Angeles Kings, and Montreal's in desperate need of a second line center. Could there be a reunion in place for Danault and the Montreal Canadiens? It seems like it's a possibility, as there's been a couple of recent insiders saying that there's a possibility that the Habs and the Kings are talking about a Phillip Danault deal, and that Danault would be a really good fit in the Montreal Canadiens organization, going back there as their second line center. So we should wait and see on that. I'm not going to say it's a guarantee by any means, because I'm not sure if the Habs really want to go after Phillip Danault again, but I could see the similarities. I mean, the Habs need a second line center. Danault has been a second line center for the Habs in years past, so we'll have to wait and see on that. But with the Habs desperately need of a second line center, and Danault recently coming coming on the trade block. I could see that sort of a deal happen. Not sure what the Kings will want in return. I think they'll probably want at least like someone who can play on the roster, or they want to trade Danault for a couple of pieces that they could flip to try and get some more secondary scoring help. So I'm not exactly sure what will happen there, but something that we'll have to keep our eye on getting closer to the trade deadline, as we could see the Habs and the Kings hook up on a very interesting deal involving Philip Danault. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But that's all much for today. I left your guys' thoughts. Do you think we could see a Habs-Kings trade involving Philip Danault? Do the Devils move off of Palat and Hamilton? Do the Penguins flip Skinner at the trade deadline? And could the Wild move Jacob Middleton? Definitely going to touch on all of that, plus all the news updates, the GM move in Buffalo, the recalls, the reassignments, and the 2 signings we saw from earlier today. Definitely touch on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Remember to like this video, and if you're liking to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below for a comment or on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Don't forget to stay tuned for videos coming out in the very near future. Also a blog to make news, rumors, analysis, stuff for that, so check that out. I'll check the description below. Can I see you guys all for the next video? See you guys soon.